Hi, everyone. My name is Tyler Ashby at Key Data. So excited for you to join our webinar today. We're going to give it just a minute here for folks to jump on. Keep in mind, this webinar is going to be recorded so we can share it out afterward. The topic that we're covering today is one that I'm excited about. It is an Ask Me Anything. What are some of your burning questions about revenue management, property management, how to grow your business, all those sorts of things? And we got great questions ahead of time while people were signing up for the webinar. Throughout the webinar, though, feel free to submit any comments or questions. We'll leave a little bit of time at the end to answer any if they come up. And I'm going to take a second here to introduce you to a couple of fun folks. This is the Rev and Research team. Ben, you want to tell us a little bit about Rev and Research and yourself?
Yeah, Tyler, thanks for having us on. I'm Ben Coleman. I founded Rev and Research a few years ago. Really just as we started to grow a consulting business that I'd kind of just bootstrapped together, just, knocking on doors. I've been in the property management business. I feel like I keep saying like 10 to 12 years, and I've been saying that since COVID, but I guess like 12, 13, 14 years, I really can't, they all blend together after COVID. But I back into the business down in Mexico, and we grew from about 3 units to about 200, 220 pretty quickly, and sold that business and started in revenue management consulting. And I know a lot of people are used to seeing Rebecca Ballard. She's we kind of called in the B team with me and Kelly here. Rebecca's definitely the queen of podcasts these days and webinars. But no, so Rebecca Ballard works with us as well. What we do is we basically do consulting when it comes to revenue management. We've got 2 approaches, one where we do everything kind of for you. Well, we're going to make the set changes in the pricing system. We're going to build things out in key data for you, unit groups, in service, out of service dates, things like that. And then we have another that's more a little bit offhands, where it's really just, Rebecca and Kelly, we kind of joke around that it's revenue management therapy, which, our job is very difficult and it can get very lonely. And so it's always nice to have people to kind of bounce ideas off of. But then also we organize people's data. We, that's where Kelly really comes in, and what she's doing with our partnership, Tyler, with, organizing all that data y'all gave us, and it was awesome to get it. And it was like, oh, wow, what do we do with it? And so Kelly's been grinding on that. But yeah, so really what we do is we're just here to help from a consulting side of things when it comes to revenue management, really to help businesses focus on that, because we just really saw a need. And Kelly can talk about this a little bit too, where you start getting into, you're a revenue manager, but you wear so many different hats, all of a sudden you're not really doing revenue management. And so we want to be that extension of your team that comes in, and hey, if it's an hour a week or it's an hour every other week, that we spend that time together, we grow in knowledge, we grow in confidence. And then in the back end of all that, we're making decisions, we're auditing decisions with you and helping you out. But that's me. Kelly, give a quick introduction as well, and then we can get going.
Thank you, Ben. I'm Kelly. I've been with Rev and Research for, I'm about to pull a Ben and say 6 months, even though it's definitely been longer than 6 months, since March. So 8 or 9 months, quick math. And before that, I was with 2 different property management companies doing data analytics and revenue management towards the end of the first job and into the second job with Cassiola. I'm doing revenue management and distribution. So yeah, to piggyback off of what Ben said, it's easy to get in the weeds. It's easy to lose focus. And so doing this consulting aspect of the business has been really eye-opening to try to be more efficient in using our time and strategizing and helping clients do the things that are hard to do on your own, and they kind of support us, and it's a cool, dynamic, interesting relationship. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
Very nice. Well, hey, thanks, Kelly and Ben, for being here. This is an opportunity for folks from Key Data to be able to snatch some time away from some true experts in the space. And we've got some great questions. So let's jump into it. Let's get to the first one. My goal is to try and stump Ben and Kelly, but I don't think I'll be too successful. We'll see. The first question.
Stump Kelly.
Yeah, see, there you go. The first question is about distribution. And I think that this is a super hot topic. There have never been more places to list your units. There have never been easier channels to use while it's still plenty challenging. And so the question comes, you know, what are the differences between these different channels? Where should I be listing? And how do I make the decision of where to list? So it's almost like we've gotten so many great options that now we've got this other problem of like, where should I really be? Who wants to jump into this one
I'll
first?
start it off from a high level. Um, when I was a property manager, I mean, heck, we were running 70 units off Excel because we didn't know there was an industry. So, I mean, our distribution strategies were more like, okay, that sounds great, let's do it. But Andrew Kitchell for Wheelhouse gave a great presentation at Streamline about getting really good at technology this year and talking about how much technology it takes to run Wheelhouse. And I think he said, if I remember right, Wheelhouse has about 35 to 37 employees and about 70 something pieces of technology. And I kind of said this on Alex and Annie's podcast too last week. I think that, we're coming to the holidays, and at least if you're like me, you're going to sit around and eat too much food and watch a lot of football. You might as well just kind of like get your computer out and poke around and learn something about key data. Or since we're talking about distribution, learn something about your channel manager you didn't know. It really, I think, as we get kind of asked this question, should we keep lowering rates? Should we keep lowering rates? Well, yeah, we may need to, but if we were better at the technology that we already have, if we were better at understanding, and this is what Kelly's great at understanding the different promotions, the different setups, the different ways that you can utilize those channels. But I would say that a bigger picture as well, Tyler. I think this year it's time to get really good at technology. It's time to get really good at your tech stack, and that's one thing we talk a lot about is like our core value is kind of being kind of a bridge kind of between your different tech stacks, between your different technologies. But I would just encourage over the next 30 to 45 days while we're trying to kind of wind down. And if you're in beach markets, you're kind of winding down to kind of wind back up for booking season. But just depending on where you are, if you've got time, it's time to get really good at tech. But Kelly, I'll let you speak to kind of where I think the big thing that Tyler asked was, where is it? How do we decide profitability between channels? What makes the decision to go from 4 channels to 5 or 5 channels to 7?
Right. Yeah, that's a tough question to solve. And it honestly takes just getting to know the different OTAs, getting to know their strengths and weaknesses, and honestly making mistakes. That's the best way to learn, unfortunately, and I've made a lot of them. Just ask Dennis. But honestly, it's really mostly about your market and knowing your competition. The size of your inventory as well and the size of your team are important too, because distribution, I learned this through my experience at Cassiola, can be a very dominating exercise, if you want to call it that, or effort, and it can quickly take over other aspects of revenue management if you don't have a good grip on it. And it's not enough to just throw up your listings on all the different channels just because you want the exposure. That can actually do more harm than good, because there's a lot to do with the content and making sure that your listings are optimized and that the prices are correct and that when they come into your PMS, the rates are not wildly wrong. You're not reconciling them to the point where there's inefficiency and lost costs or costs endured there. But honestly, it really just comes down to feeling it out and seeing what's going on each of the channels. For the most part, Airbnb and VRBO are those dominant players, and you really have to learn how they work. It's sort of like you're at the mercy of them. You're never going to be able to compete against them. Yeah, their commission is not the most fun part of it, but it's sort of just like an investment, if you will, pay to play. But then there's booking.com and some other channels that are kind of up and coming. And so that's kind of been a big factor in what's happened in Orlando the last year or two, just because of the increase in competition after COVID. You really do need to get on that additional channel like booking.com to dominate the rest of the space. If you're not, you're really going to miss out. So it's really not a one size fits all kind of a solution, but I think you just have to start somewhere. You start with those main top 3 and kind of see how they go, work with your prices, your markups and all that, just to kind of compete against your own portfolio as a starting point. And then you learn what you have the bandwidth for and what you don't. So
Yeah,
Yeah, I
and
mean,
hey Tyler, I would add on to that real quick, and I meant to say this to start with. If you're in a market like Orlando, if you're in a market even like Destin, where VRBO really is the major player there, you know what? Vendors in our industry are really great. I mean, they really the majority of them like actually care. They really want your business to grow. So say you're not on Booking.com, say you're not on Wimstay, say you're not on a Hopper, give them a call, set up a demo, get some data. Understand the supply increases that they've seen in your market. Understand the ADR increases, the ADR decreases. Understand the data, and I think that if you don't have a rep with VRBO with Airbnb, I would reach out, get a rep, get somebody that you can lean on, because I think that our industry is great, because I think the more that a property manager leans on their vendor, on their account manager, the more that the majority of the time, the more that we're willing to give. And I think that y'all do a great job of that at Key Data as well. Like the more engaging that you are with your account manager there, the more you're going to get out of it.
mhm.
And so that's what I would encourage when I say get good at tech. Like ask questions. Go to, hey, you never thought about being on a channel? Why not call somebody? Like just shoot them an email and say, hey, I just want to take a look at these 3 or 4 things. I want to see inventory increase. I want to see this KPI. And hey, could you bring that to our meeting and can we go over it? And I guarantee your response will be overwhelming there.
Yeah, no, that's a
yeah,
really good point.
I would agree. I think, you know, when people ask this question, I feel like you kind of need a base of knowledge to come from. Like, how have you been performing on OTAs? And one thing I want to run in Key Data real quick and show people in case they're not familiar, they haven't seen it in a while. Under our marketing reports section, we actually have a marketing source report. And this looks at stay dates. So you can kind of think about your seasons when, if you don't have a ton of time to explore this, just think about your high season. And then start to look at what are some of the marketing sources or groups of sources where you get the majority of your bookings. So if you're asking yourself the question, am I doing better on Airbnb this year than I was last year? It's very easy to see that. Another thing I would suggest for folks to do is come up with some segments. We think about revenue management in seasons and segments as an easy way to get
I like
started.
that a lot.
So come up with a segment of maybe, your houses or condos in a particular market or bed size, this sort of thing, and look to see how they're performing year over year and how that trend's going. Another thing that I would suggest to folks is, we don't have to reinvent the wheel, right? Hotels have been doing distribution for a long time across a lot of different channels. We've got the benefit of taking some of their best practices and hopefully not making all the mistakes. And some of those best practices from hotels have been to utilize channels differently. And this is going to be kind of a paradigm shift for folks in vacation rentals who might put all their inventory out and it's out all the time on these channels, and it's not differentiated. And so think about, do I really need a channel manager in my peak season for my most popular units, or is it better as a supplement in other times of the year? Think about the commercial terms that are involved in your OTAs, and see when it makes sense in your business to list in a particular place, and other times it may not. There is a different traveler maybe on Booking.com that's not on Vrbo, or on Airbnb that's not on Booking.com. So it's not necessarily always all the same eyeballs. It can be, you've certainly got folks that shop across these channels, but if you think about them as individual piles of eyeballs that are going to see your property, think about how you want to drive that journey from their search to the booking. So I would start by really understanding where you've been successful in the past. You might want to double down in some of those places. I think that Ben's got great advice here to reach out and get more information. Talk to these other channel partners that you may not be as familiar with, and don't be afraid to jump in and try something out,
And I think
especially during times
don't be
whenever
afraid
you
to make
may.
a mistake. Yeah,
What's that?
Like what Kelly said. Don't be afraid to make a mistake. Like that's what you're going to learn. Like I think we are lucky in that distribution aspect of getting to kind of jump into hyperspeed a couple decades with what hotels done. But I think when you get down to it, I love what you said, how you said it, segmentation and seasons. I like the idea of segmenting out my underperformers year over year, and then looking at some kind of shoulder seasons where you don't have any exposure. Like, what can you do wrong that you didn't do wrong last year? How can you be wrong to go in and undersell, or maybe quote unquote undersell, or oversell, however you want to say it, by putting it on too many channels in the month of, in a shoulder season month, and all of a sudden you're at 75% occupancy and you took a 15% ADR hit, but your RevPAR is up 30%. It's like, oh, well, hey, I've kind of backed into that and I thought I made a mistake. I think making mistakes, especially making mistakes in that segmentation and seasons, taking that year over year, taking those units that that always struggle and playing around with them. There's really not much that you can lose there. The mistakes that you make, like honestly, are they that big a deal? Like we've already kind of messed them up. So let's
Because they
try
just
to.
your time, your dignity, but other than that, nothing else.
Other than that, like I've already given that up a long time ago.
Yeah,
But,
no, I know.
I
Yeah,
love
no,
it.
you're absolutely right though. The honestly, the account rep is it seems like such an obvious thing, but so many of our clients are like, no, we don't have one of those. I'm like, well, you should. And they want to learn just as much as we do, maybe more, because booking.com is actually, it's a perfect example. It came from the hotel space, and if you use it enough, which I'm guessing both of you are familiar, and a lot of people on this call probably are as well, it's built for hotels. You can't run a promotion and look at what happens overall. It's meant to be, go in and you look at one listing. When you have 200 plus properties, it can be really hard to use. And if you make enough mistakes in the beginning, it can be really hard to backtrack. But like Tyler said, knowing your consumer is almost just as important as knowing your actual properties or the channel itself, because who books on those channels, that's the likelihood that you're going to get bookings for your properties. Like booking.com, I think we saw it at one of the Verma sessions, the lunch and learn, that I think booking.com was one of the more last minute lower ADR channels for both higher priced families, longer stays, and then Airbnb has that rural kind of, not rural, opposite, urban kind of last minute getaway couples, that kind of rep. So if you know that and you can test that out in your market, maybe it's just with your bottom 20% from last year, like you said, Ben, what do you have to really lose? Then if it works for those, try it with some more, then you kind of ease your way into it as well. I think that's probably the best way, because what works for your competitor may not work at all for you. We've had that happen with clients too, where I'm like, oh yeah, they've had great luck at this and that. And then they do it and they're like, well, we didn't really see that kind of luck, but there's obviously other factors that you have to kind of work through on your own. So it's an easier said than done kind of ordeal, but practice makes perfect.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I love it. Thank you. Those were great responses. Let's hit another question here. So we're going to kind of shift gears and talk about discounts. Oof. I know whenever I was running a vacation rental company, man, it felt like sometimes it was the only lever I had to pull. And this question specifically asks, I'm not pacing as well as I had hoped. When should I start discounting? How far in advance in order to get back on track or to be successful? So to kind of put this question into perspective, let's think about, I've got a week coming up that I'm expecting to be 70% occupied, and I'm not quite there yet. When should I start that discount process? And I know this is a big question, so maybe it's best to kind of talk about how to set up a good discount strategy.
I think
Yeah.
Kelly, I think just kind of hitting on what Tyler said earlier. I love how he said segmentation and seasons.
I was just gonna say, yeah, you kind of nailed it there. You have to start with that first, and you're never gonna get it perfect. There's always going to be demand changes or whatever the case may be. You're never gonna get it right, but the more proactive you can be, maybe you don't get to that point where you have to get back on track. And that's really what we've been trying to drive home this year after COVID and all the other unpredictable elements of the last few years. Our strategy has really been to look at what are the peak months or the peak dates, what are the shoulder dates, where can we drive occupancy, where can we prioritize ADR, and kind of set up our strategy from there. And it really depends how much we want to discount depending on what part of the year we're actually in. So we look at, you'll hear us say median lead days or median ADR probably ad nauseum, but it's for us really important because it gets to the volume aspect of the whole equation of revenue management and not just averages. So we kind of try to present for each month or season, if you will, where that sweet spot is for ADR, where that sweet spot is for booking window, like 60 to 90 days, for example. Once you get to that cusp of 90 days, you kind of know where you want to be. And if you're not on track at that point, that's when you want to start to look at, are your prices competitive? And then once you get past that actual booking window, let's say 60-day example, then
When we
you're in that position to start actually discounting, because that's when Ben says it well, you sacrifice ADR or you're running the risk of that. And if it's a
losing the,
peak month, what's that?
I said, where the home's losing value.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. So if it's a peak month, you have more at stake, so you really better be on it. But if it's a shoulder month, that's another prime opportunity to drive occupancy if you haven't already booked, because there's less to lose from an ADR perspective. So that's really how we try to structure it. Easier said than done. But with Wheelhouse and tools like Key Data, we can kind of just look at it like a basic Excel example. So that's really how we set it up. And as much as we can do on our own, we do, but then we start to pull other levers like on OTAs and doing custom promotions and other things to try to increase exposure and do as much as we can to promote the listing and its discount, but not actually take a huge hit ADR wise. So
Yeah, and to kind of close the loop on what Kelly was saying there, like it really goes down to seasons and segmentation and seasons. You know, the foundation of our segmentation is kind of twofold. We're going to look at, you know, year over year struggling units, but we're also going to group by what Kelly said, those median lead days, the volume of lead days. That methodology, it matches up with, you know, we use Wheelhouse primarily as our pricing software. It's the only one that we touch. And we're looking at units that should be booking at the same time. And so, Tyler, to answer your question there, like, you know, Kelly used the example 60 to 90 days. So at 90, it's kind of the front end. Wouldn't it be nice to know where that bucket, where that segmentation was for that season at 90 or 120 days? Because think about it, if we're at 120 days before that arrival month, and say we're pacing 15, 20% behind, we've got time actually to discount a little bit in there. And I like to use the example of an elevator. We all start at the top and we're all going to end at the bottom. So who wins? It's who takes the most volume up in this area, not who takes the most volume inside 14, inside 21 days, depending on the market. And that's really what Kelly's saying there is the foundation of what we're doing is we're going to segment it out by median lead days. That we're going to do our best, if you want to look at it like a bell curve, to move the bell curve more away from the arrival month so that we have more time to book, because we do have a pretty good idea from a historical sense when that asset loses value. When does it start losing value for 4th of July? When does it start losing value for July? When does it start losing value for October? And what do we need to be looking at and when? And the last thing I'll say, I think that this is all new. Like there is no textbook for this. Thank God I didn't write it. I mean, nobody will be able to understand it, but you know, it is new. It's something that you got to play around with. And I'm going to steal that, man. Seasons and segmentation.
I was just gonna say, I wonder how many times I'm gonna hear this in the next month. Segments
Yeah, we
and
only gave him
seasons.
credit twice. So I can steal it now and just say I can't.
Yeah.
But that's our rule. But
You summed it up much better. I think it's really, we call it a scheduling tool, but it's trying to be less reactive. And really what it comes down to, the bottom line is so that we can optimize, maximize RevPAR, whatever the correct wording would be there. Because if we can shift that curve, like Ben said, if we can get more, even if it seems like it's 10% less than the market further out, and we're not tanking our rates last minute, usually you're
We
going to
win.
come out on top. So yeah,
Yeah.
roundabout way of answering your discount question, but
Well, no, I think what I'm hearing both of you say is like it's important to have a game plan. Like you need to do a little bit of you need to watch the film, you need to do a little bit of that research ahead of time so that you're prepared, right?
yeah,
And really being prepared for your rate strategy isn't just, what do I think it's going to book at next year? It's really at what point are these different groups going at what price is that going to
yeah,
book, right?
yeah,
Because it is
exactly.
this curve. So to give some folks some ideas about how to start the journey of building your game plan, one place we like to tell people is to go in and look and see how it booked previously. Not necessarily, I mean, you got to start somewhere, right? So
Yeah.
if we look at a report like your booking curve, you're going to put in your arrival dates. So again, we're choosing season, and then you can put in your segment of whatever property group you're looking at. And then you can see, how did that book last year? When did you take the first reservation? When did you get the majority of your reservations? And how many did you pick up in the last 4 or 5 weeks there? And this can give you, I mean, it's almost like a little warm blanket, right? Like now I know I've got my security that
Yeah.
at this point in time, I should expect X. And at this point in time, I should expect, the next piece. And now you've got some guideposts to help you in your decision making. So if you're thinking about this for the first time, choose a couple of your most profitable segments and the seasons that are most important to you, and do this analysis. Go in and look and see, when does the booking, when do people start booking, and what does that look like over time? And then set up some spots for yourself and say, I want to be at X percentage at this point. And then that can help to drive those rate decisions. If you're not there, one thing about revenue management is it is a feedback loop. And so we can set prices wherever we want. And if no one's booking them, we're not getting the feedback that what we're doing is correct. And so if you're in the right spots and you got the right listings, all that kind of stuff, then it comes down to your price. And once you start receiving the feedback, now
That's
you've
great.
got some information to
yeah,
work off.
100%. And it gives you some, I don't know if step goals is the right way of putting it, but instead of just saying, okay, we're at November, what day is it, 28th, we're 30 days out from Christmas, roughly 60 days out from January. What do we need to start doing as far as rate drops go? But instead of doing that, probably should have, for some homes, already been looking at December and January and definitely November. And so even though we're right on the cusp of the 30, 60-day window, it may be too late for some properties. It may also be too early for other properties to start worrying about it. And so it really just kind of gives you some, like you said, Tyler, some benchmark, some control. It also helps with owners too, as far as like giving them an idea of what you're actually doing. Because I think a lot of the frustration or the confusion and the questions that come from owners comes from a lack of understanding of what you're actually doing. And if you can get rid of some of that ambiguity by sharing with them, like, this is our general approach, it gives you a few trial runs too. Like if it doesn't book in the 90-day window, at least you started 90 days early and not 30, you know what I mean? So it gives you some flexibility, because like I said earlier, it's not going to happen exactly the way you think it is, but it's all about the most likely case scenario. And like you're showing on that graph there's going to be some outliers. There's going to be some really low prices. There's going to be some really high prices. Let's say we're talking about one arrival month, and there's going to be some bookings that come in maybe 2 or 3 days before, and there's going to be some that come in 365 or more days before. It's all about where the majority of them come in. So even if you don't want to look at medians just yet, you could just look at how many came in within the 30-day window, how many came in within the 30 to 60-day window. Then you can kind of start to get a feel for what your data is actually showing you. Not to get too nerdy, but just like histograms kind of just show where that general volume, shut up, Ben, where that general volume is. But bar charts like Tyler has right there, lovely.
I think, Kelly, I think it's great. I think what I think Tyler, what you said, I really like too, of, you know, kind of segmenting it out, looking at something like this, going, okay, I feel like we should be 45% booked. Well, dang it, we're only 28% booked. Well,
Mhm.
last year on November 28th, we were 25% booked. So we're actually doing better than we were last year. But I swore we were 40% booked last year. We hear that all the time. Like, I'll tell you this, to be honest, like last year in Destin was really hard for me because it challenged a lot of my feelings. And I am not the most patient person, which Kelly can for sure tell you, Rebecca can for sure tell you, Andrew Kitchell can for sure tell you. I'm not all that patient. And so I had to just sit on my hands and I had to go back. I had to go back and kind of fresh my brain on what reality was. Because I'm like, we're sitting here at Super Bowl Sunday. That's a major marker. I should be X% for these homes. And I'm like, this is when we all, and I think a lot of it comes, at least for me, it came from like those just kind of open the floodgate booking days or booking weekends that just didn't come this year. And that kind of set a false sense of security of, oh, I'm used to seeing all these
Mhm.
bookings flood in. Well, hey, well, booking windows are, and I started looking at it, okay, booking windows are going down. Okay, so we're just behind. What if I look at this year over year date, 7 days or 14 days kind of, you know, like November 28th, I would look at it November 14th of 2022 and take a look at it that way and go, okay, we're actually ahead. Booking windows are going to be a couple weeks behind. We're actually ahead. Now we're behind. Let's not discount just yet. Let's hold rate. Let's hold rate. Let's hold rate. But I think just really creating that security blanket of, and even if it's just as simple as, okay, here are my 2-bedroom beach views, or here are my 2-bedroom ski in, or my 4-bedroom ski in, ski outs. Just kind of creating some broader, just a little bit deeper than bedroom count, I think is the key there, just a little bit deeper than bedroom count. And just kind of throw those in there. And in key data, you can create custom unit groups very, very easily. Create those in there, benchmark them. And then, you know, you go in there and save yourself a report so it comes to you every Monday, you know, or it comes to you every Friday or every Wednesday, whenever you're going to do your revenue management. And Tyler, like you said, it creates a security blanket so you don't act on feelings. It's like, oh, hey, we're only 3% behind. It's like, hey, let's just hold rate, or hey, maybe we take these that are behind more than 5 or more than 10% and we just discount those. And let's see if it's a demand. Let's see if it's a booking window shrinking thing or if it is a price sensitivity thing. And you kind of just play around with it that way. And you know, you hate to say it that way, but I've kind of always said, you know, the goal of a revenue manager is not necessarily to be always right. It's to be proactive enough that nobody knows they were wrong.
Hope that's not the goal. Otherwise, I should be in a different industry. Yeah. Uh,
I
I,
love that.
I don't know what
Um,
I think we got way off track there with the original question.
No,
But no.
I think it was perfect. I think that you guys really answered, you know, and gave some solid steps that folks can take. You know, and if this isn't your something that's exciting you, you know, you've got Ben and Kelly and Rebecca that are more than willing to help you out. Let's move on to another question here real quick. We could talk about this one for forever. Here's a question that came in, and I felt like, man, I don't really know how to answer this one. How do you get the last 5% of value out of your revenue management tools? Like, how do you squeeze those last few drops from the tools that you're taking advantage of?
So hey, Kelly, I'll take this from a pricing tool standpoint, and you can take it from like a key data standpoint. So from a pricing tool standpoint, if you feel that you're already at 95%, well, kudos, man. Like that is awesome. The way I think I would almost rephrase the question of how do I continue to get 95% out? Because I think that you're a true master user when you're requesting features. And I love that. That's one thing I love about the Wheelhouse team is like we are begging people for feedback. I mean, when Kelly was at Cassiola, she gave us there's some things Kelly came up with that are in the platform now. And you know, I think that it's really cool to like say something out loud and then to have it built into something is really cool. But the way to get the last 5%, I'm gonna say is almost is not necessarily to start over, but to do an audit, to do a deep dive audit into your settings. Because especially if you know, if you've got 100 I mean, I would say even six, even, you know, you got more than 50, 60 units, you start getting to where it gets tough to do those in your head. You know, you start hitting that 40 unit mark, like under 30, 40, at least I could do those in my head and I could kind of keep up where everything was. But one thing that we run into at Rev and Research is, you know, you kind of forget what you do. So documentation, number one, start really documenting your processes of what you're doing. Number two, I would just spend, you know, I would spend 20 to 30 minutes twice a week just running through 2 to 3 listings, 4 to 5 listings, however quick you are in your pricing software, and going through your minimum stay rules, making sure that you don't have anything overriding something. Like we found something that we were overriding yesterday. We're like, why is this not working? And it took all 3 of us, and we're like, oh, click somebody. And I think Kelly told Rebecca to click there, and it was like, oh, there it is. Hey, it's within, not after, click that. There's so many things that you end up band-aiding, and especially when you're not doing this 100% of your time, you're wearing 4 or 5 different hats, you get a call from an owner, hey, 4th of July is 20% too low or 20% too high. Okay, max price, done, move on. Going back through your settings, making sure that you're ready for 2024. And I think that's the great thing about a pricing tool is that, you know, you don't actually set the rate anymore. The rate floats or the rate rolls. And so your rates are already rolling into 2024. So go ahead, go into your pricing tool and just make sure that you don't have any minimum price or you don't have any, and there should be no max and min price conflictions because then it should be an error, but just making sure that all your min prices are set up correctly. Like I noticed something in an account we did where we had some things date specific. It was in a market where there wasn't a lot of data. So we got a lot of rules in there building things out for owner expectations. And all of a sudden, like we go in there and change them. And I'm like, oh, holy heck, like, that's rolling over to 2024. We got to go in there and build some rules. I would think that's where you get the 5% out of the next 5%, the last 5% out of your tool. The other thing I would say is I would challenge you to ask your account manager to ask your pricing tool to build something that you need. Because if you're already at 90, 95%, I think the way that you're going to get more yield and more value out of your pricing tool is by leaning on your account managers, leaning on the like at Wheelhouse, the I don't even call them customer support. I mean, they are amazing. Leaning on them and asking for features, asking for things, knowing the tool well enough to ask for things that are going to help you be more efficient, help you be more organized, help you see data better. And once again, I think our vendors, I think every pricing tool in the space is very open to hearing suggestions like that. But Kelly, go ahead and take it from the key data side of things.
Yeah, so I think, I don't mean to steal your word here, Ben, but I think the segmentation, as much as you can do that across Wheelhouse and key data in the form of tags, if you're talking about Wheelhouse or whatever your pricing system is, like a grouping scheme.
Yep.
And doing that in key data as well with custom unit groups. I got to get back to the other language. And when you do that, you can look at the data basically like in parallels. So you can pull up those tags in Wheelhouse and look at, okay, I made a rate change to this group on Wednesday. It's been 2 weeks. Now what's the pickup? What's the pickup in the market? You know, that benchmarking report is like, I don't know what I would do without it. Just throwing that out there real quick. But it's honestly, that's, I think the most powerful thing is to be able to see kind of both of those screens, so to speak, up at once, because a pricing system is a pricing tool, right? It's not supposed to necessarily be all data and graphs. Key data, on the other hand, not a pricing tool, but giving you that illustrative aspect. It really, really helps if you can tie action to result, and that's, I think, the best way that I've been able to do that. So when I say getting 5% back, I think it all comes down to how much you really know your data, how much you're willing to work with it, massage it, so you get out of it what you put into it, kind of thing. But honestly, with both of these systems, I think the worst thing that you can do is overcomplicate it and try to get carried away, get too fancy. We've made that mistake. Some of our clients have made that mistake where you try to go too crazy. You start to kind of lose trust in the system. That's the other thing too, learning the different intricacies of both systems so that you know if something's actually an error or if it's just an inconsistency. I don't know. But the more you can understand both of those tools in your own data, I think the better off that you're actually going to be. So it starts off with like, what things do you have full control over? What are your like knowns, your mandatory things that you need to have in a pricing system, or that you need to see in data? I don't know what KPIs you want to look at, and then go from there. And what things can you be flexible on? Hopefully more than the former, because that's really where you get bogged down and you kind of actually lose I think the power of the tools, because they're both really robust tools, but you have to let them work the way that they're going to work. So I would agree with what Ben said. If you're getting 5% back, I think you're doing pretty well. But that's kind of been for me what's pushed it over the edge.
I agree with
Segmentation.
the segmentation, and Tyler, you know, having your custom unit groups match your grouping scheme, or your tags, your grouping scheme, and your pricing tool. Because I think, you know, and we get this question asked a lot, like, oh, we're on Wheelhouse, why do we need key data? And I'm like, you know, or we're on price slides, why do we need key data? I'm like, well, because key data is data. We're taking like Wheelhouse, we're taking the data, they're taking the data. They're doing that, but they're cleaning it in different ways. They're cleaning it for more of an algorithmic approach. And so I think being able to group from key data into your pricing tool makes it much easier to make decisions on that. I know Wheelhouse has released a way to actually be able to go, okay, hey, I want to see this unit group or this tag compared to the portfolio and look at pickup. You can do that in key data as well. Being able to find trends, I think, and just like hearing Kelly speak, Tyler, and hearing you, I think really it's like, to get that extra 5% is you're going to need to be able to organize everything so that you can see trends across the portfolio easier.
Yeah.
So that you can make
collaborate them together, kind of.
Yeah, collaborate those together. And then you can start, once you start seeing trends in your portfolio, you can start moving into the market and key data and that benchmarking report and seeing if it's a market trend or if it's just a me trend, and then I need to make some decisions.
Yeah.
And you know, I think that we often spend a lot of time thinking through the lens of a revenue manager, which is not a bad thing, but invite someone else to participate, because you know, this data is vital for revenue managers, but it's also vital for marketing managers. It's vital for sales managers, for your leadership team. Even operationally, to be able to understand what's coming down the road. And so if you're the only one at your company that's using these tools, invite a friend, because there's something in there for everybody.
I agree with that.
I think we got time for one more of the questions here. And I think that this is kind of a big one, and it probably involves us to or requires us to look into a crystal ball a little bit and predict the future. But it asks, what do we think is going to happen to supply as, you know, new homeowners over the past couple of years? Maybe those COVID buyers start to face tough economic outcomes. What do we see coming up in 2024, 2025 when it relates to how competitive it is to get a homeowner or to keep a homeowner? What are your thoughts on this?
When I say get good at technology, I'm talking about your whole tech stack, but I'm also talking about key data. I'm talking about your pricing tool, understanding it, because it's what you said. It's these COVID buyers, and you know what? You can call them Airbnb investors, you can call them private equity, you can call it VC money. There's so much money coming into our industry. The real estate transactions have changed. The real estate buyers have changed, and you know what? They're not looking at it to give their 3 kids and their grandkids 6-8 weeks a year. They're looking at it that their mortgage is X and they want to drive Y. And being able to explain that, I don't think we're getting a lot of help from real estate agents right now when it comes to getting projections. And, you know, hey, you bought $100,000 home, or, you know, you bought $1 million home, you're gonna make $100,000 in revenue, or 120,000. That's not how it works all the time. I think historically as well, you know, I think historically our industry has done really well in recessions. I think that, once again, kind of like I said, like what happened to me in Destin, we kind of are looking really ahead to growth for our inventory. I think that we kind of forget that a lot of times, and and maybe we haven't seen this as much as we'll see it this time, just because of the buyers, just because of the people that have bought. What's the first thing you're going to do when you're not hitting your mortgage numbers? Is you're going to pull that 15-20% commission back and do it yourself. I think right now there's some times where there's not much to say. And Tyler, we talked about a little bit yesterday in our pre-call, and I really liked it. It's a great time to revisit your owner contracts. It's a great time to revisit the services that you offer. It's a great time to do some competitive research to make sure that not only is your take rate or your commission rate competitive, but the services that you offer. Is there something you can do that differentiates yourself from the competition? But I think the biggest thing that we're going to see is the questions that are going to be asked to property managers, and they're going to revolve around revenue management. They're going to revolve around, why was my rate this? Why did I take that? Why did we take something for this date that could never have gotten me to my number? And so I do see a big churn. I do think we're going to see some churn. I think we'll see. It's interesting to me that I've seen more churn from property manager to property manager, not necessarily going from a professionally managed group, set of inventory to a rental by owner. More just kind of churning that way. But I think we will see some rental by owner come in. And I think we all know, that lasts a season, and then they want to come back. I think that's just my opinion, and I could be wrong. I haven't really seen a lot just go by themselves, at least in my conversations with clients. A lot of them they're charting, or they're picking them up as well. So when I say go back and visit your owner terms, go back and be very competitive. And Kelly, please speak to, I know you've got some things to say on this.
No, yeah, I was just going to say, I think it really depends on the market, because if there's other property management companies, I would 100% agree with you. I think the cycle is going to be that these current buyers that are maybe financially strapped, or these new buyers, probably are going to want to, like you said, keep that 20% for themselves while they're in cash flow trouble. Yep. And then maybe they're in better control and they're willing to go to a property management company. I think you realize quickly that 20% is worth more than you realize when you go to try to do it yourself, and you realize that you have to deal with these guest complaints and all of the things that stack on top of it that you just can't do on your own website, OTA, revenue management, everything. It's just that builds up on top of just the basic operations. So it's I think it's going to be a cycle, and eventually I think a lot with the advocacy and the legalities and all the things that are happening in a lot of markets, having a property management company backing you is going to go further than it did before, I think. And it's going to be one of those things where if you don't have that protection, I think you're gonna deal with more ramifications than you otherwise would. So that's kind of how I see the cycle going. But as you said, Ben, I think that people are going to have the right to be a little bit more picky because there's more money at stake. If they're not making the money that they think that they can make, they're going to go try someone else. Again, depends on the market. If you have that liberty to go and try somebody else, you probably will. If you don't, I don't know, you suck it up or you go back to doing it on your own. There's kind of just that fluctuation. Yeah. But I definitely think there's going to be some disruption. I think RBOs can be really good competition for property management companies. I think they can also be really terrible competition. It just really depends on the nature of them and the extent of them in terms of the market share that they dominate. So I don't know if that answers your question well, Tyler, but that's my prediction.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'll add one piece here that, we've seen a lot of new supply, but we've also seen a ton of mergers and acquisitions within the space over the last 24 months. So it is really a great time to be a hospitality service provider, right? To understand what you're really great at and to deliver it consistently, because it's going to make you stand out against maybe some of the larger players in the space, or those that have been swallowed up maybe by some other larger players, right? So it's a great time to really understand what you're great at and deliver that service to your homeowners, because if your whole business is just I list on Vrbo, and I book the place that way, you know, that's not a very deep moat for someone to cross. Instead,
Exactly.
build a strong business where you're providing great service at a competitive price. And I think that you'll have a lot of opportunities for success as properties change, as Ben was saying, back and forth between different property management companies.
Yeah, and I think right now the time is to stick to your guns. Like if you've been in business a while and you are a luxury brand, be a luxury brand. Don't try to pick up 22-bedroom condos. Be a luxury brand. Stick with what you're doing. Like we share a customer, our client Tyler, Alicia Bro down at Fun Vacay. She's growing like crazy, but I'll tell you this, man, she ain't gonna bend on what her requirements for to come into her rental program are, and I respect that. I think that, you know, and Kelly's talked a lot about this and done a good bit of work at one of our other jobs, one of our previous jobs, of defining what profitability truly is. Defining, are these units that we're losing, are they actually profitable? Like how, like, because, you know, we can kind of get bent out of shape about homeowner churn or homeowner attrition, but we don't necessarily know, were we actually making a lot of money? Were we making money on that? But I think sticking to your guns, I think, Tyler, what you said, Kelly, what you said as well, especially what Kelly said of like, okay, guest communication. Okay, I've got cleaning communication. I got revenue management. I've got this. Being able to present your tech stack. You know, one thing we did, I think, very well as a property management company when I owned one was we used the tip of our spear for owner acquisition was revenue management. You know, I told my partner, my business partner at the time, I said, look, bro, I'm so tired of meetings. I said, I'm gonna grow us up. And I learned real quick that you can actually grow as much up as you can kind of vertically or horizontally. And so like really figuring out where can I be more profitable in my business? And I think number two, deciding, Tyler, and we've kind of said this and kind of hinted around it, what are you good at and what are you not? Like if you don't like data, outsource it. Get somebody in to come in there. Because the last thing you want to do is pick up 15 units and then have to like onboard them and price them if you hate it. Do things that you love. Do things that you're good at. Do things that you built your business. Outsource the rest. Outsource the rest. You know, obviously you want to keep your handle on your margins, but you know, hey, if you love revenue management like I did, I hated cleaning, so we outsourced cleaning. I was like, I don't even want to think about it. And opening up your mind to think, opening up your mind to get with your team to figure out how we're going to weather this storm for the next 12 months. How are we going to get to where we want to go over the next 12 months so that we're setting ourselves up to continually grow.
Yeah. I love that. I think that's a great place for us to end the conversation. Ben and Kelly, thank you so much. Ben, if folks are interested in getting in touch with you, what's the best way for them to find you?
Not me.
Or me.
Not us.
Rev and
I'm joking. LinkedIn is probably the best. Just Rev and Research there. You can always hit revandresearch.com. We've got an easy little customer form there. You can shoot me an email, Ben at Rev and Research, or Rebecca at revandresearch.com. Rebecca is going to be way easier and way better at it. So I would definitely reach out to Rebecca. But LinkedIn is probably LinkedIn honestly is probably the easiest, or just hitting the website real quick, because on the website too, you can go and pick out a time to book and all that stuff and just knock it out in 30 seconds.
Sounds great. Hey, thank you so much. Thank you everyone for joining us today. We hope that we helped answer some of your biggest burning questions about the space, and we appreciate your time. Have a great day.
Hey, thanks, Tyler.
Thanks for having us, Tyler.
Thanks.
Yeah,
Bye.
always. Bye. Oh, yay. I thought that went well.